When I first moved to Cullmann, Alabama, I thought it was a sleepy, small town. It had nice people and places to hang out. They even had an annual Oktoberfest each year. That's when I started to notice something. Everyone liked to dress up in historical costumes during parades, cemetery tours, and fairs. At first I thought, wow, those Southerners sure like their reenactments. But then there was this guy. He plays the role of the town's founder, Colonel Cullmann, and it seems like he's everywhere. He doesn't make any money doing it, and he doesn't live in town. And he's from Nashville, Tennessee. So why would someone volunteer so much of their time and energy into playing the role of a town founder? Cullmann is located in north-central Alabama, about halfway between Birmingham and Huntsville.
I am Colonel Johann Gottfried Cullmann.
Colonel Cullmann, a native of Bavaria, came to America in 1865. He took the long way to the U.S. through London, New York, Philadelphia, Cincinnati, and finally Alabama. While in his homeland, he was a radical. His political activities made life difficult for him, especially after he attempted to assassinate the Prince of Bismarck.
And we had put a plan together to dynamite the train. We thought that if we could get rid of Bismarck, then we would be able to install a democratic government. We were able to get some dynamite, and there was a large gully, a large valley coming into Frank Valor, and we set this dynamite at the bottom of the trestle and waited for the train to come. We waited till that perfect moment when the train was just over the deepest part of the valley. We set the dynamite off, and the train tumbled. It tumbled into the valley. There was only one problem, and Bismarck had missed the train. So the only thing that we were successful in killing was a carload of hogs. That was very discouraging for us. But as a result, Bismarck found out that I was responsible for putting that plan together, and that I was responsible for the assassination attempt, and he put a price on my head.
Despite his previous experience blowing up trains, Colonel Cullmann got a job as a land agent for the South and North Alabama Railroad. The railroad company gave him the title of colonel. They were looking to create a depot, and Colonel Cullmann was looking for a home. He wanted to create a German colony, so he sent word back to his native country, inviting people to come to Alabama. The first 5 families arrived, and they began to build a town. Colonel Cullmann leads a hectic schedule, appearing at Oktoberfest, hosting pageants, and dancing.
Oh, he represents a smiling face. I mean, when you see him, you immediately are drawn to him. He's awesome, he's always loving, and he wants to help you in any way, and I think that's someone that everybody is drawn to. Well, honestly, since I was at Cullmann High School from 9th grade year, the drama department has been really involved in Oktoberfest, but I've never got to experience all the festivities that go on outside of the museum. So this year, when I bit into the cupcake and I did get the chocolate pudding, I was like, oh, this is so exciting. Each girl gets a plain cupcake, and in the middle of one, there's chocolate. And whoever bites into the cupcake with the chocolate in it is the winner, and I got the honor of biting into the cupcake with chocolate in it. I don't like chocolate, so when I bit into the cupcake, it was like, oh, I was excited, but I was kind of like, at the same time, so I just kind of held it up and showed it to Colonel, and I remember Colonel, he looked at me and he was like, you were the one who didn't like chocolate.
This is a little polka about a train.
Just Sage. I'm Tracy.
And I'm David.
What's your favorite thing about Oktoberfest?
Colonel Cullmann, because he's nice and he dances with me every year. I'm his princess too.
We asked Nancy Clemens Moore how they found someone to play Colonel Cullmann. She builds the Hay People in town each year, and she's on the Oktoberfest Board of Directors.
And I am curious how he became Colonel Cullmann. How did we find him? because I don't know the answer to that, and I've never asked. I guess he won a look-alike contest. I don't know that.
I'm Larry Rowlette. I am an engineering manager. I'm an electrical engineer.
How did a drum-playing electrical engineer become Colonel Cullmann? He caught the eye of two former members of the Oktoberfest Board of Directors.
Back in early 2000, Elaine Fuller and Pastor Bob Kurtz they had actually the year before that, in 1999, had come to Decatur, and they had went to some type of a demonstration that had Commodore Decatur. Well, then they kind of looked at each other and said, we need a Colonel Cullmann, and so they brought that idea back. Now, they looked for a colonel, somebody to portray the colonel for about a year. And during this period of time, my family and I started going to church at St. John's, where Pastor Bob Kurtz was the pastor, obviously. And when we started going to church there, he told Elaine, I've got the perfect Colonel Cullmann. So we were doing the church was doing a presentation at St. Bernard. So she came out to the college and was able to see the St. John's show, and got to see me do the speech from President Madison. And she come and asked me afterward if I would portray the colonel for her. Now, Pastor Bob had already kind of given me a heads up on that. He told me that Elaine was going to ask me. So I had a little bit of time to think about it. But I couldn't resist aggravating Elaine a little bit. So when she asked me if I would portray Colonel Cullmann, I told her I'd think about it, and took a couple steps off, like I was going to just walk away from her, and then turned around and said, okay, I'll do it.
Now this year, though, Colonel, he decided that being as we were doing lots of firsts, this is a dual winner. It's two people. Your Distinguished Service Award goes to Pastor Bob and Pat Kurtz.
And the plant that I was working in Lewisburg was going to close. So I started, obviously, look for another job, and accepted a job with SCI and ARAB.
Congratulations.
We had looked in ARAB for a home. We looked in Albertville and Gunnersville. And one weekend we were on our way back to the interstate to go back home and pass through Cullman. And we were hungry, so we stopped at Shoney's to get a little bite of dinner that night. There was a real estate agent sitting behind us listening to the conversation, and happened to have one of the real estate books. He handed us the book, and the book on the front cover was this old farmhouse that had been redone totally from the ground up. So he went out and showed us that house that night. We made an offer the next morning. So we kind of fell into Cullman.
So he did live in Cullman at one point, but now he lives 45 minutes away in Decatur, and he's still Colonel Cullmann.
Sometimes I'll have to admit I feel like Colonel Cullmann even when I'm not in costume. And I'll tell you why. Since the Colonel started out to be just an Oktoberfest thing, and it very quickly turned into a year-round portrayal. After that first year, people started calling me Colonel instead of my real name, Larry. They still call me Colonel today. Even the people that I work with call me Colonel. My friends call me Colonel.
What does a community get out of having someone play a town founder? We went to Atlanta to speak with Dr. Annette Lang, a public historian.
What a historical reenactor who's representing a town founder can do is to, first of all, get people excited about their own past. If just one of the thousands of people who sees that person, or even the hundreds of people who sees that person, goes off and reads a book, goes into a local archive, this would be the ideal thing, and actually looks up letters, diaries, newspapers, any of the sort of historical artifacts. Because people, if they look at the most accessible artifacts, I always think newspapers are the one, are just amazed at what they find out about themselves, about their community, about the past. A historical reenactor can create that sense of community. Someone portraying a town founder can create that sense of community, or at least help it along. And that it brings really an awesome responsibility too, to try to do it right, to do it in such a way that provokes people to explore the past rather than just making them complacent, rather than just saying, you know what you think about our town's past, it's all absolutely true, carry on. You know, I mean, you want to challenge people a little bit, I think, and you want to get them excited about the past. And, you know, there's nothing wrong, I think, in having sort of warm, fuzzy feelings about it too, in making the past appear to be more approachable, less two-dimensional. As to why you would want to do this, I think there's something incredibly exciting about doing it. I mean, I think most people who are reenactors ultimately are hams. They want to be actors, and they're entertaining an audience, and an audience that hopefully will appreciate what they're doing. There's also that sense for yourself as a reenactor that you are touching the past. And again, how much you're touching the past may actually depend on how much work you're doing in the background. What it brings to people who do it is just a tremendous sense of fulfillment and joy and connectedness and challenge. I think that's the number one reason why reenactors do what they do. They just thoroughly enjoy it. I don't think it's out of a sense of duty or anything like that. I just think it's part of what makes us human, is finding ways to connect with each other and with the people of the past as well. And if somebody can get you to stop and say, look at where you are, look how much more interesting it is, then that's a valuable public service.
I think when people see the Colonel and the portrayal of the Colonel, they're not so much comparing facts from a history lesson. What they're doing is they're accepting the portrayal of the person, and really, you know, what I'm wanting to accomplish today is not a history lesson, but it's just a remembrance of the Colonel and what he went through and why we're here.
Okay, we're gonna play one just for you, Colonel. It's the Fancy Pants Polka.
I like that one.
Yeah.